Hello there. Welcome to Frontlines of Social Good, where we bring you the latest news and insights from the world of philanthropy and fundraising, and of course, social impact. I'm Jay Frost. On today's episode, we're examining the pressures reshaping philanthropy, how the sector is responding in real time. And we'll start, of course, as we usually do, with the biggest gifts of the week, including new funding for science and conservation in San Diego, engineering innovation at Wayne State, and major investments in mobile stroke care, nonprofit infrastructure, and leadership development across the country. Then we'll turn to some of the week's most urgent headlines. Sarah Hershander, staff reporter at the Chronicle of Philanthropy, joins us to unpack her viral investigation, 10,000 job cuts in 70 days, a sobering look at the wave of nonprofit layoffs rippling across the sector and what it means for the future of the workforce. And then later in the show, we'll hear from Ken Miller, author of the new memoir, Becoming Ken, My Journey from the League to Prison to Purpose. Ken shares his powerful story of transformation and reflects on purpose, leadership, and life after personal and professional upheaval. But first, let's take a look at this week's top philanthropic gifts. Number 4, the Brett Torino Foundation has given $6 million to UCLA Health to expand its innovative mobile stroke rescue program. The gift will fund a second mobile stroke unit, this time serving the San Fernando Valley. These specially equipped ambulances bring hospital-grade stroke care directly to patients in the field, dramatically improving outcomes for those suffering from stroke-related emergencies. Coming in at number 3, a $7.5 million anonymous donation has been made to the University of Arkansas Fort Smith to establish a new center for nonprofits. The center will provide education, training, and resources to strengthen nonprofit leadership and operations throughout the region, making it one of the largest investments in nonprofit sector infrastructure in the state's history. In second place this week, a name that you'll be familiar with, Dr. Irwin Jacobs, co-founder of Qualcomm, has committed $10 million to the San Diego Natural History Museum. The gift will launch the Joan and Irwin Jacobs Center for Science and Conservation, supporting cutting-edge research and conservation initiatives that use technology and data science to protect the region's unique biodiversity. And our largest gift this week comes from James and Patricia Anderson, who have pledged $50 million to Wayne State University. The transformational gift will support student success, faculty research, and entrepreneurial initiatives within the College of Engineering, which will now bear the Andersons' name in recognition of this historic contribution. In other news, the Association of Fundraising Professionals is offering full refunds to international members who are concerned about attending its upcoming annual conference, AFP ICON 2025. According to the Nonprofit Times, the decision follows rising concerns from international registrants about the potential risks or difficulties of traveling to the U.S. amid growing political tension and immigration uncertainty. In a video statement, AFP's new president and CEO, H. Art Taylor, addressed the issue directly, saying, quote, "You had no expectation when you registered for this conference that this would even be an issue, that crossing the border into a country that is the land of the free would ever be an issue." Taylor emphasized that it is both responsible and, in many cases, preferable for concerned members to stay home this year. He reassured members that those who request a refund will receive one in full. The annual ICON conference typically draws between 2,500 and 3,000 attendees, with international members comprising about 10% of the conference pool. That figure was even higher last year when the conference was held in Toronto, and 30% of attendees were Canadian at that event. Taylor added that AFP is consulting immigration attorneys to help advise members facing uncertainty and is actively considering a virtual option for this year's conference. You can contact AFP for more details. The U.S. Department of Education has frozen over $1 billion in federal funding for Cornell University and $790 million for Northwestern University amid investigations into alleged civil rights violations. The freeze affects grants and contracts from federal departments such as health, education, agriculture, and defense. This move is part of a broader crackdown on universities tied to pro-Palestinian campus protests and issues like diversity programs and transgender policies. Cornell acknowledged receiving partial stop work orders from the Defense Department related to research on defense, health, and cybersecurity, while Northwestern confirmed media reports about the funding freeze, but is yet to receive official notification. Another major institution at the center of this storm is Harvard University, which received a formal letter from the U.S. Department of Education on April 11, threatening to cut off nearly $9 billion in federal research funding unless it complies with the list of federal directives. The letter, signed by Deputy Secretary of Education, demands that Harvard eliminate DEI programs, implement merit-based admissions and hiring policies, and audit departments for, quote, viewpoint diversity. It also asserts that the university's current policies may violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. In response, Harvard President Alan Garber issued a strongly worded statement on April 13th, rejecting the administration's demands. He wrote, Harvard will not compromise its constitutional obligations or institutional independence. The First Amendment protects freedom of thought and expression, not conformity to government-imposed ideology. Garber affirmed Harvard's commitment to combating anti-Semitism through its own measures, but added, quote, we will not accept directives that undermine our academic mission or chill intellectual inquiry. In response, $2 billion in federal funding to Harvard was frozen just yesterday. And this morning, just 2 hours ago, President Trump on his Truth Social account stated, quote, perhaps Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status and be taxed as a political entity if it keeps pushing political, ideological, and terrorist-inspired supporting sickness. These escalating federal actions have sent shockwaves through higher education, raising profound questions about free expression, institutional autonomy, and the future of public trust in the nonprofit and academic sectors. But behind the policy battles and funding freezes lies another story, one unfolding much more quietly but no less urgently. In just the last 10 weeks, over 10,000 nonprofit employees, and perhaps many more, have lost their jobs. That's the finding of an investigative report that's made headlines across the philanthropic marketplace. Up next, we're joined by Sarah Hershander, staff reporter at the Chronicle of Philanthropy, to discuss her new piece, 10,000 Job Cuts in 70 Days. In this pre-recorded interview, she walks us through what's happening behind the numbers, why layoffs are hitting nonprofits hard and fast, and what it all means for the future of the sector's workforce. Here's our conversation. Jack? Sarah, thank you for your willingness to talk about this. This is an exciting piece. The title, of course, is 10,000 Job Cuts. What inspired doing this work?
Well, a group of us at the Chronicle for a while now have been frustrated by the lack of data around nonprofit layoffs, nonprofit job data. It only comes out like every 5 years. And given some of what we're seeing right now, anecdotally, so many of us had been seeing stories about layoffs on a rather large scale, not just because of the Trump administration's recent funding cuts, but because of other financial pressures that preceded them, struggles with inflation, struggles with dwindling donations, with even sort of lingering impacts of the pandemic era and sort of that pandemic funding that had been cut off a while back. So we had wanted for a while to sort of find a new way to tell these stories of these layoffs and use some data to back up what we've been hearing. And so we came up with the idea for this tracker as a way to see how these layoffs are playing out in real or almost real time across the country.
And can you describe what the tracker is and how you've developed it?
Sure. So the nonprofit layoff tracker, which the Chronicle of Philanthropy created, it's basically using a few different sources, including these they're called WARN databases, which are maintained by each state, and they show major layoffs at larger employers, including nonprofits across the state. plus a bunch of like local media articles that we've been curating from across the country to come up with a very, very, very rough estimate of nonprofit layoffs each month. So far we have layoffs from February, from March, and from part of January. We started collecting the data after the inauguration on January 20th, and we intend to continue updating it every month.
And you said WARN database. Could you break down that acronym for me?
I don't think I know the exact acronym, but it's basically like a state level database of however many jobs were lost, and employers, and this is supposed to be sort of like a workers' rights piece of legislation. It occurs on a federal level, but most states have their own sort of local laws around it, and larger employers are required to send in a notice of how many layoffs they're going to include in the next sort of 60 days. But I have to get back to you on the actual acronym.
Well, and it's not meant as a quiz, but I know sometimes the meaning is suggested in the acronym and sometimes it's not. So when the name is WARN, it almost sounds like a warning system, an early warning system for
Well,
jobs.
it is an early warning system. And I just looked it up. It's worker adjustment and retraining notification, conveniently spelling out WARN, which, yes, that's exactly what it's doing. It's warning sort of both the employees, but also the broader public about a mass layoff or closure.
And I guess that's also looking at data, or rather employment that's above a certain number of employees. And of course, many nonprofits wouldn't even match that threshold, would they?
No, and that's something we've been emphasizing a lot with this database, is that it is definitely an undercount. I can say very confidently that it's an undercount because I personally know of smaller nonprofits whose layoffs didn't make the cut either for these WARN databases, which require, again, notifications from employers over a certain size, or they didn't catch the eye of local newsrooms. And so they weren't captured in that data. And we're doing our best to reflect that, but we are asking nonprofits who don't see themselves reflecting in this data, and we link to all of our spreadsheets of all of these layoffs in the article, to submit that to us. And we have both a Google form that you can fill out sharing your layoff data, or you can just send us an email.
And I'll make sure we include some of that information in the show notes as well, and the chat during the live session. These 10,000 sounds like a lot, but I think even in the article you cite one organization in Boston that was an 1,100 job loss. Yeah. And we've heard anecdotally about losses, for example, within the NGO sector, where some organizations that were reliant upon USAID contracts have lost hundreds. I can't verify that. As you've been doing this research, what else are you just hearing, and how is that contributing to your understanding about the current situation? Yeah.
And again, we can't necessarily say that all of these layoffs are because of the funding cuts, but it is something that is explicitly cited by some of these groups, especially these sort of international aid organizations who've already seen USAID kind of just collapse over the past month or so. We're seeing explicit citation in some of these WARN data forms where they say we had this unexpected budget cut, and so we had to lay off might have been 30% of their workforce. So the funding cuts are definitely a huge issue. We're seeing a lot of other cause areas that we see the administration particularly targeting with DOGE, who are also reporting an uptick in layoffs. So a lot of what we classify as human service organizations, but include a lot of groups that do sort of refugee resettlement work, general services for the community, like Catholic charities. We're seeing a lot of those groups engaging in layoffs across the country, as well as some healthcare groups. So I think as the months go on, we'll see, and again, these are usually like delayed. So you might have a funding cut and you have 6 months of reserves and you're okay for a little while. But then if philanthropy doesn't come in and sort of fill in those gaps, we're going to see those layoffs increase. And I think we'll continue to sort of see that run along a line of where were groups really dependent on government funding and where is that funding no longer exist.
I did want to ask you about this, and I don't know how you would know other than just some of the reporting people are telling you that perhaps some of the layoffs or the furloughs are anticipatory and others are responsive. Are you getting a sense that nonprofits are, at least in some subsectors, doing furloughs as a way to protect those reserves, as opposed to just responding to the lack of funds to keep people on staff?
Sort of. So normally where we're seeing the furloughs, it is these international aid organizations that I think we're sort of crossing their fingers and hoping that the funding would come back. But in some of those cases already, we're seeing that the furloughs are being replaced by permanent layoffs. So FHI 360, a prominent global development nonprofit, had announced furloughs back in January, and that appeared in our most recent data set that we just released. And then just this week, they issued a warn notice announcing that many of those furloughs, plus a few more layoffs, were becoming permanent. So yes and no. Like I'm seeing a few of these groups doing these hopefully temporary layoffs, which are furloughs, but it's seeming like it's more of sort of just like we're going to try this for now, hold our breath, but leaning more towards they're becoming permanent layoffs.
Where are these people going? Are you getting a sense of any of that just in general reporting about once someone is laid off, if they're able to take those skills and apply them, whether it's at another nonprofit that doesn't feel as impacted currently, or a private sector organization, or even setting up their own shop? What kinds of things are people doing now that these layoffs are occurring?
That's a great question that we're trying to report on now. And I think similar to a lot of these federal workers that are being laid off, many of whom are looking to the nonprofit sector for jobs, just not a great moment for them either. They are sort of exploring all of those different opportunities. So definitely people transitioning into the private sector, which was a trend that we were seeing even before this. I can only imagine that it's going to increase that sort of trend of folks looking to apply their skills elsewhere. So that's definitely something. Because while I'm sure a lot of them would love to stay in the nonprofit sector, a lot of the places they would work are experiencing these same pressures, and same thing, of course, with the federal government. Now, state government might be an exception to that, and that's definitely happening with federal workers. I'm curious to see if we'll see nonprofit workers also kind of looking for those state government jobs as a replacement for some of the work that they've done. We also have seen in some cases, I should mention, where like a nonprofit might be cutting a certain program that gets government funding for, say, refugee resettlement, and then they're moving those folks elsewhere to other programs that they have that rely on other forms of revenue. So I think that we might see some of that where people are moving to other cause areas that might not be as vulnerable. But I do expect to see a lot of folks maybe sort of experimenting outside of the sector and looking for other opportunities.
There is a lot of breakdowns of the data you already have in the article, which we can't see on the screen with us right now. But could you at least give us a kind of a hint or a sampling of what you're seeing as you break down the sector? Because this is definitely going to have probably disproportionate effects on some rather than others. Where are the primary effects of some of these layoffs occurring?
Absolutely. In terms of geography or cause area?
Well, actually both. Yes.
Both. I mean, right now, of course, we're seeing a lot of like international groups that are experiencing layoffs, and they're disproportionately based in DC, in Virginia, a lot in North Carolina as well. So that's something we've seen in the past couple of months, just because those funding cuts came the earliest. But we're also, like I said, seeing a lot of groups that are just really small branches of larger organizations like Catholic Charities that do so much of that sort of like local on the ground work. And tend to receive a significant amount of government funding, where those are getting a lot of layoffs that we're seeing. So it is kind of spread out around the country. I've seen a lot of groups in Texas specifically who work sort of closer to the border, doing a lot of immigration work, either accompaniment for legal accompaniment or refugee resettlement. That I'm seeing a lot of. So geographically, it's quite spread out. And cause areas, I think that right now we're seeing a lot of that sort of international human services organizations, and then also healthcare, which I think goes beyond just the funding cuts, but in general, I've been seeing layoffs for a few years now.
So net, as you're gathering this information, and I know it comes probably in two primary buckets. One is data, which is kind of divorced from people. It's the numbers that help us to understand the picture. You can sort of put it together from that. But then the other are the stories. As you piece all of that together, what are some of the big themes you're hearing about where we are? And I know that crystal ball questions are the least favorite thing, especially for a serious reporter, but I do need to ask you, are you seeing some trend lines that at least are leading you to look at different things as you do further reporting on the subject?
Yeah. Well, I'd say we're definitely looking now at what philanthropy is going to do about all of this. So I speak to a lot of groups who are frustrated and feel like there isn't enough of sort of a magnifying glass on what's happening to the sector right now. And so they're thinking a lot about like, how will we reinvent ourselves from this? Like, which organizations will survive? How will our funders respond? And some are definitely responding, and some of my colleagues have been reporting on that. Quite actively, but in sort of a larger scale, a lot of them feel like they haven't seen the kind of stepped up response that they might have seen during a previous downturn or during COVID, for example, when philanthropy stepped up in a big way, and so did the U.S. government. And so I think there's a lot of frustration about that. Still looking at my crystal ball, something that we're expecting is just to see a lot more layoffs. So the sense that this is sort of just the beginning. These are just the organizations that were maybe most vulnerable to cuts, where it might have constituted like 40 to 50% of their revenue. Of course, we're going to have to cut this program if we have this administration that's unlikely to renew our contract. But there's other organizations where government revenue is an important part, but maybe not all of their revenue. And so I think we'll see sort of like a trickle down effect in the next few months of what all of this means.
You just cited the difference between our current set of events and COVID in terms of the response. Mm-hmm. Are you able to see data on that? Because at the Chronicle, you're looking at not just this issue, but many issues. And one of those that you probably have better data on than this, because you have to rely on the state databases, as you've pointed out, at least so far, is with giving data. And are there some trends that you and your colleagues are looking at that give you reason to be, I don't know if hopeful is the right word, but thinking about what the opportunities are for philanthropy to address this if and when people understand the gravity of these impacts?
Well, I do think that COVID is a really good example of a place where philanthropy and in some cases everyday donors really stepped up. They saw that nonprofits were struggling. They saw that the groups in their local community weren't able to provide the services that they were doing before. And they either stepped up and volunteered doing food deliveries, maybe, or they opened their wallets to support these organizations. And again, I think this time is a little bit different because at the time, the government was a major source of support. In this case, the government itself is what is causing this sort of financial pressure or causing a large part of it for some groups. So I definitely think there's an opportunity there, and that proves it, where philanthropy could step in and really kind of hold up these organizations at a really difficult time.
And finding the messaging for that, is that one of the biggest challenges, or is it something else?
Finding the money, I think, is also a really big one because, and I hear sometimes from organizations that don't even receive government money, they're like, we're kind of happy right now that we're not vulnerable in the way some of these other groups are, but we expect that some of our funders might move their money to other groups that are losing their government funding, and that seem like more of a priority. So that's something they're also thinking about, sort of these limited resources, whether or not philanthropy is going to sort of step up and start increasing their payout this year. Like, we don't know that yet, at least in most cases. So I think definitely, yes, messaging, but also just these finite resources and the sense that, like, we don't want this to turn into a survival of the fittest organizations. We want there to be enough for everybody. I think that's going to be challenging.
And once again, you are encouraging people to complete, I guess, one form that you have so that they can participate in the data collection. And are you looking to do that over what period of time before you create another set of reporting on this subject?
Our next update to the tracker is going to come out in early May, and that's going to show April data. So anything from this month or past months that you think might have been lost, we're definitely looking for, and we'll be continuing to accept these submissions for the near future. I don't expect this to stop anytime soon.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you, Jay.
Our thanks again to Sarah Hirschender at the Chronicle Philanthropy for providing us with some insights on that story. And once again, you can check the chat if you're here with us live for a link to the story. If you're watching this recording afterwards, you can search for it on the Chronicle's website, along with the rest of their content. We've been talking, of course, about the mounting pressures facing the nonprofit sector, from mass layoffs, as in this last story, to political crackdowns, as we discussed before. But behind all these headlines, there are also deeply personal stories, stories about challenge that challenge how we think about justice, failure, what it really means to rebuild a life and make an impact in the impact sector, but also beyond. Ken Miller, who's known well to this sector, knows that journey firsthand. He's, among many things, the author of a powerful new memoir, Becoming Ken, One Black Man's Journey from Ivy League to Prison and Back Again. It traces his path from academic success to federal prison, and then years later to a new sense of purpose and leadership in the nonprofit world. I won't burden you with his entire biography, except he has a tremendous impact on our work in the impact sector, and you can read more about it. I'll make sure that you have details on how you can read more about that later, as well as his book. Ken's story raises questions about race, privilege, accountability, redemption, and it also asks us to look at who gets a second chance and what it takes to earn one. It's really a pleasure to have back in the program Ken Miller, who joins us now. Ken, thank you so much for taking some time to talk with us today.
Thank you, Jay. And we also want to say what a wonderful guest you had on before. That was very timely, very timely. Part of my background and my experience is obviously in the nonprofit world. That's what I do. So I'm just glad to be on this and have this conversation we're about to have.
Ken, there are so many places we can go with this. I've had a chance to talk with you privately before in a podcast interview, and you've also done training, not only here, but so many places. People will be able to also see you at Icon, but we'll get to that towards the end. But most people will not have had a chance to read your book because it's just coming out. So the print date was when?
The print date, the actual release date is May 19th.
May 19th. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because I've seen
no
the print. But could you give us a sampling of it? Would you mind reading a little passage so people can get a sampling?
Sure, I'll just start at the beginning, which is, of course, we call the introduction. And again, the book is Becoming Ken, it's obviously by Ken Miller, and this is the introduction. Introduction, catalyst, an agent that provokes or speeds significant change or action. Cockroaches scurried the instant the door opened, their glossy backs scattering across grimy tiles. I jolted awake, my heart ramming against my ribcage, and for a moment I couldn't remember where I was. Then I realized a utility closet in a rundown Reno rooming house, stinking of mildew and ammonia, was the closest thing I had to home. My company these last 3 days had been brooms, mops, and a bucket of stale water, and a legion of insects no landlord wanted. We had that in common. Both they and I were unwelcome. And now, hovering over me with an angry glare was a middle-aged black man who owned the building, or at least he had enough authority to kick me out. Get up. I'm calling the cops, he barked. If you're still in here in 5 minutes. As I walked outside, the September sun of Reno felt too bright. I was holed up in that closet, avoiding the cruelty the streets had while descending deeper into that special brand of self-pity that devours all dignity. And every time it reminded me of how my own jaw had been broken, not once but twice, how I ended up with my mouth wired shut, forcing to survive through an unimaginable pain. How did I, an Ivy League graduate from Dartmouth College, become a crack-addicted drifter sleeping in a closet? And we have another couple hundred pages to describe that, but more importantly, describe how I came out of that to be able to sit here and share a little bit of my story.
Yeah, it's very powerful, and it's powerful writing too. And so thank you for sharing that. As you said, you had this Ivy League degree, successful career. You also, as it says in the title, you had some time locked up. When you were initially indicted, when it all came crashing down, what went through your mind then at that point?
The first time, the second time, or the third time. So I'm a 3-time convicted felon. Spent years behind bar in the penitentiary. And the one I remember the most, well, really the first and the third. The first time, I didn't believe it was happening. I had no sense that this was real until the judge said to me, "Do you have anything to say before I sentence you?" And I was in for a Class A felony, which is a 5-year minimum in the Washington State Penitentiary. And I remember at that exact moment that this is real. I mean, it like hit me all in one like second that this is real. And anyone who knows me, I can talk. I can talk. I can pontificate. I can share. I can talk. And I remember when he said that, I had nothing to say because I realized this in the next 15 seconds, it's going to change my next few years of my life. And it finally realized it at that point. And then the other one would probably be the third time. And the third time I went and went to court to get sentenced for sales of a controlled substance. And I was sentenced to 6 years in the penitentiary. I remember saying to myself, if I am the same person going into the penitentiary that I am coming out of the penitentiary, I will have the same results. I will have the same results. And so I made some decisions that day and shortly thereafter to make some modifications in my actions and behavior.
Now, I know you can't take us through all 200 pages of that journey right now, but you can probably give us an idea about when you made that decision, because you talk about this in the book about this book isn't just, confessional. It's really a book about how anybody who's kind of in a hole, whatever that hole is, can find a path out of it, essentially. Is that a fair?
Correct. Okay. Very much so. That's very important. Yeah.
So can you talk about that a bit? I mean, especially when you made a decision on that day, you chose that moment, even though it was a very dark moment, to make a change. What guide us through not only how you came to that moment, but then how you effectuated it, how others can do that too.
So the moment, and there's a moment, it wasn't actually in the courtroom that I made the decision. I call it the decision. So first of all, you must understand where I'm at today. I own 4 businesses. I'm very successful. I'm very well respected in the nonprofit world. Great. And that's the byproduct of a decision I made the fall of 2004. And that decision was lying on the bunk in the jail before I was sentenced to go to the penitentiary. And I had a talk with God. Very simple. It's in the book. I had a talk with God. And God didn't say it was going to be easy, didn't say it was going to be without pain or discomfort, but he said that he would be there with me and that we together can overcome and or deal with any of what I call the vicissitudes of life, which are the ups and downs of life. And I believed it, still believe it to this day. And it is becoming truth for me. So that was the decision that, hey, I'm not going to engage in this behavior or these actions that are inimical for my long-term well-being. So now what do I need to do to recover? What do I need to do to have resilience? And resilience is the comeback from the setback. How can I continue to fail forward? It's all right to stub your toe or fail forward. And so what I had to do is I had to look at the 4 areas of life, which are physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, and work on all of them. And the state of Nevada gave me 3 years to work on that, and I worked on it. And I came out a much different man than I went into the penitentiary, and I've continued to grow since then. I like who I am today. I'm not gonna say am I self-actualized, fully actualized. I'm cool with Ken. I'm really, really good with Ken. Ken's a good person, and I'm good to say that, in the public. So that's what I do. Those 4 different areas were the predominant. And then I had to deal with, again, some of the challenges of life. And how do you deal with those challenges of life? And fundamentally, I go back to truth, and then I go back into gratitude, and I go back to getting out of self, because the pain is in self, the emotional pain. And so I think, what can I do to support others? Someone has passed away. I hurt because of that, but there's others that are hurting. Well, I had the maturity, I had the discernment to be able to deal with that situation. I have the finances to be able to deal with that situation. What can I do to help others that they can maybe not have the tools that I have, at my disposal to help them get through, get out of me and get out of self? That's just a small portion, but yeah, that's what I did.
And is that really the idea behind the book itself? Because I know you've talked with people before, you've done a lot of mentoring, and then you've also been the example not just for yourself and your family, but you provide that example to others. But the book is different. Strangers will read it; they don't know necessarily about your background, which we should get into in a minute. All the amazing things you've done in this career, but for strangers who pick this up, what do you hope that they'll take away?
One of the key things I want them to take away is that so much of your future is in your past. Let me say that again. So much of your future is, the word we use for the past is antecedents. What preceded where you're at in the present, right? And what I did is I took away what happened to me. In fact, so I had a lot of trauma as a child growing up. It's in the book. It explains that, but I don't use that as an excuse to be a victim. I don't use it as an excuse for my bad behavior whatsoever, whether past or present or sometime in the future. That is not an excuse because this happened to me. I'm going to do this to you. Okay. So what this book so much of is about is probably a couple of things. One is to take away the power of the secrets. I'm a big one on that. Take away the antecedents or the preceding trauma that you have had. Taking away that to make you either a victim or someone that harms because this has happened. It's called really deflection. And then probably the third thing that I want people to see is no matter where you attained, you can still fall. Remember, I was an Ivy League. I smelled good. I talked well. I looked good. I was 21.
Right.
Making $50,000 a year back in 1984, which was good money, believe me. Working in the corporate world, on the outside, you would have thought everything was well. But I came from a certain level. I fell back down, but I got myself back, and it took me years to attain that level. I'm way past where I was in 84, financially, socially, but more importantly on how my self-talk and how I carry myself and how I communicate with myself. And I'm a real big one on that. So you can start high, and that's what you'll see. The Ivy League to the penitentiary, but really it's the penitentiary and the streets. I was homeless for 20 years. Homeless, meaning I'm the panhandler on the corner. And then how do I get to where I'm now a business owner? I have employees. I do the things that I do. And you can do that no matter if you came from trauma like I did, you came from poor like I did, or if you came from the top of the mountain and have fallen down, you can still get back up and be a contributing member of society and also have the ability to look in the mirror and like who you see.
You just talked about several different powers or things that have powers over us, and one of them was the power of secrets. Could you talk about that a little bit?
One of my favorite subjects in life is to talk about the power of secret. So I speak from the stage, and I just talked about it in Denver last week. What a secret says is that if you knew all of me or all of what I've done, you would not associate or be with me or look askance at me or treat me in a way that would not be life affirming. So we're afraid to allow our secrets out. I'm not saying you have to be like me and go on stage and talk in front of thousands of people and talk about what for 99% of people would be a secret. I'm not saying that. And I'm also very much make sure I understand that this is secrets of self. It's not secrets about my wife. It's not secrets about my family. It's secrets about self. So I had a big secret. And what that secret was, and I'm a very frank person, I used to be a male prostitute. I used to turn tricks. It's in the book. And because of that, I was shame-based. And when you become shame-based, that means I am something less than. It's not that I did something, that's guilt. And I'm still guilty. I've pled guilty and I will continue to plead guilty for the things I do, but I am not less than. I'm still a child of God and I affirm myself. So to take away the power of those secrets, I had to share with one person, but really I had to share it with me. What does that mean, Ken? That means I needed to write it down or to bring it out of the memory. Yeah, this is what I did. This is the truth of this, but I'm not less than. Then I shared it with one person. Then I shared it with a small group. Then I shared it with a larger group. And now I can share from the stage and order in my book. Like I said, it's in the book.
Yeah, one thing that strikes me about all this is that we're in a time when it seems like there's not just political division and cultural division, but there's also this tendency for people to otherize people whose experience they either don't have or don't imagine that they have. And you just talked, for example, about homelessness. And so, governments around the country are trying to figure out either how do we provide housing for people because we have a housing crisis, or how do we stop seeing these people in tents in our communities? It depends on where you are in this conversation. But those are all people. And you were one of those people. The question I have here is, how can a conversation like this, like the one you're bringing up in this book, help us to not otherize people whose experience is different from our own? It doesn't have to be about homelessness, but about anything where there's a tendency to say, oh, that person's somehow different from me, and I can't understand that experience. It sounds like you're helping us to get a window on Ken, but does this also help us to get a window on other people whose experience maybe we imagine we don't share?
I agree 100%. So I'm in June speaking to SHRM, Society of HR Managers in Anchorage, Alaska, for free on my dollar to talk about ex-offenders and hiring of ex-offenders. I am a 3-time convicted felon. And many of you may be listening, or your organizations would not hire me. I am a great fundraiser. It would have been your loss. And I'm not saying that everyone is the same with me, but all we ask for is an opportunity, whether I'm ex-offender, whether I'm ex-homeless, whether I'm ... One of the things that I hope to do is to take away the otherwise, looking askance at certain groups of individuals, because I was that person. So read my book or go to one of my speaking or listen to one of my podcasts and see that I'm just a human, just a child of God, and I'm just like you. Because you wouldn't know that looking at me. You've met me, Jay. You would not know that looking at me, my past. And I don't carry myself like that or, exemplify it, but I was that person. And so to be able to look at that person on the street, male, female, young, old, and say, man, I remember hearing about this one gentleman, man, if he could do it, she can do it, or he can do it, or that individual can do it. It's about, again, giving people opportunity and seeing that we're all of this community of a whole, which is of humankind.
I realize I jumped over the successes you've had today. And so for people who don't know your work, again, they might be coming to the book anew, but they also might be coming to you anew. You mentioned 4 businesses. Could you give us kind of a thumbnail sketch about all the different things you're doing today? Because it's a lot of stuff.
So I've had one business for 11 years. I've been a fundraiser for 15 years. I've been teaching for probably 13 years. But I started a company, Denali FSP, and what we predominantly do is I coach in fundraising for organizations, mostly small and medium size. And I coach on what are some practical, fundamental aspects of fundraising. Okay, that's great. And then what we also do in our specialty is that we write grants for tribal entities. My wife's Alaska Native, and we write grants all over the country, large, usually multi, and so I'm very, very cognizant of the grant world, and especially the federal grant world. That's company one. I have another company called Evolution, and that is offshore virtual assistants that are trained in artificial intelligence. And they are literally go to school, get trained in artificial intelligence, and then they can work for-profit, not-for-profit as offshore virtual assistants. And then I have another company that speaks. I speak across the country, and I talk predominantly on resilience and self-esteem. And I do that all over the country, and that's called KenMillerspeaks.com. And then I have the book, And the book is Becoming Kin. And then I have 2 more books coming out later this year, one on fundraising, and then one on one of my favorite subjects, again, in the softer area. And the book is going to be on respect. And what does that mean and what does that entail? But literally the word respect. And then the other one is going to be on, I don't know, I'm thinking guerrilla fundraising or practical fundraising. I'm very much into what is real, not a theory person, but what works. And I've worked with over 130 clients. And so I have somewhere to speak from.
And for those who are here with us live, you can find a link to Ken's book, Becoming Ken, in the chat. But also, and we're not done yet, but I do want people to be able to find you in general. So when you're going and speaking and so forth, is that also on the Becoming Ken site, or is there another place where people can look for that information about your work?
Yeah, so usually the best way to contact me is LinkedIn. Just Ken Miller 84 is my handle. The book and the speaking are on the same website, even though I have a special landing page just for the book. The book is being, again, released May 19th. I'll be in Newport Beach May 24th for a book signing, and then I have some more potentially scheduled. Again, yeah, I'll just say this. I wrote the book to get on more stages. I wrote the book to inspire, encourage, and allow people, if they so choose, again, to take away the power of the secret and also to be encouraged or inspired to be a better themselves, literally. And I do many of them for free, and I do some for pay. That's great. I don't care. It's not the important part. But the important part is when I get off the stage and people come up to me in tears, or can we talk? And I sit there and I talk to them one-on-one. And of course, no cost. Where are you at? What is your pain? What is your challenge? What resonated with you? And we talk. And again, my other passion, Jay, you know this, is that I mentor Black men all over the country. Why just Black men? Because I is one, it's my choice, it's my decision. And I also know the need for Black men to have a Black role model. And I am a role model, and I'm a good role model. That's why I do it. So, yeah.
And speaking of that role modeling, again, you've chosen these vehicles. You've chosen a lot of different activities. You're running 1,000,000 miles an hour, it looks like, from the outside, which is amazing. But you've chosen the book as one way to get this out there. You've also talked about, again, the power of things like secrets and the power they have over us. There are a lot of people who are watching right now who maybe they're recording later. They've made some mistakes. Maybe they're big mistakes, maybe they're small mistakes. It's hard for anybody on the outside to judge the severity of a mistake, but it's still, they feel it. They may not be ready to share their stories yet, or even believe that they have a story that's worth telling. What would you say to them?
Everybody's got a story worth telling. And the thing we want to see, the story is just the vehicle. The story is the vehicle to hopefully a solution or to support someone. I'm a Black male. I'm not a white female LGBTQ of Asian background, but somebody needs to hear from that person. You see what I'm saying? One of my biggest things, Jay, I've done in the last 5 years is to get more Black men on the stages to talk about nonprofit world. I've done a lot of work in that area. Because when I was coming up at ICON and Bridge and all the other conferences I've been to, I never saw Black men speaking from them. I hardly ever saw Black men in the fundraising nonprofit world. And I thought that was important. I still believe that's important, that we see people from diverse backgrounds sharing, knowing that, hey, I can do that. I can be on the stage, or I can be a fundraiser no matter what my background or diverse community I belong to. So this is the term I use. Sing your song. Sing your song. I don't sing country western. But if you do, man, hallelujah. My wife loves country and western. I get in the car and I'm like, oh man. But she loves it, but that's her song. So sing your song from your stage, whether it's book, whether it's one-on-one, whether it's small group, whether it's a podcast, whatever it may be, but sharing, you have a story. People sometimes say to me, man, I don't have stories like you. Thank goodness you don't have stories like me. You don't want my stories. I still have guilt. I don't have shame, but I still have guilt over some of the things that has happened to me, or really more importantly, things that I have done. So you don't need my level of story, but you have a story, because everyone has challenges and everyone has impediments to their growth emotionally as a person.
And Ken, just putting this on a topical lens, because we started the show with that, and I don't know if you want to come on this, but you just talked about diversity and the importance of it. You gave a real world example of it. Different people have different stories to tell from different stages that resonate for different people, and the importance of that. There are some people who might be thinking, I can't go there right now because there's a backlash against diversity, equity, inclusion, et cetera. What would you say to that?
Patience. Patience. It is what it is. One of the biggest things I have a Black men's book club that I run, and we're doing 6 pillars of self-esteem. And one of the key, probably the key, is truth. What's the facts? We are in an environment that you got to play the cards that have been laid. Play the cards that have been laid. And it may cause concern, challenges. It may cause difficulty for the communities that we represent or that we work with. It is what it is. So how do we work around that? How do we stay in the game, and still try to assist and help as many people from whatever communities that we're representing. I don't care if it's arts and culture, environmental, social services. Jay, this is one I could talk on a while, but the key thing is please believe in what you're doing. Stay, if you can, in the sector. My fear is that we're going to lose a lot of people out of the sector. Okay, they'll get out of the NGO, NPO world, which is nonprofit world, and go into the for-profit, which is not bad. Do what you have to do to take care of your family. But my thing is, we're going to lose a lot of good people. We probably already lost a lot of good people. But again, those are the cards that we've been dealt over these next few years. And if you can, fight the fight. We need to get the vote out or whatever we need to do to make some changes. Let's do it.
Thank you so much for all of this, Ken. Really do appreciate it. And we'll all look forward to seeing the book. Everybody do check that out. You can find it in the show notes. And you can also see Ken on stages everywhere, including at Icon in Seattle. Thank you, Ken. And before we go, here's what's coming up next on the Philanthropy Mastermind series. First of all, on How to Raise, our CFRE accredited show this Thursday, April 17th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Sherry Kwam Taylor joins us to reveal 5 hidden non-fundraising factors that can make or break your ability to raise general operating support. If you're working hard but still not seeing the growth you need, this is the session for you. And as with everything else, it's free, it's non-commercial, and of course, in this case, it's also a way to gain your CFRE credits if you are looking for that designation. And on the PM podcast, which is mainly for the ear, but you can also watch it in various platforms, we have Sabrina Walker Hernandez sharing how she raised millions, tripled revenue, led a capital campaign, and then faced a life-threatening diagnosis with both clarity and strength. It's a powerful story that I'm sure you'll enjoy hearing, again, wherever you like to listen to podcasts, or you can find, of course, over on the DonorSearch YouTube channel or the DonorSearch website. Plus, this Friday, our exclusive interview with Tom Ahern, one of the most sought-after voices in donor communications. We'll talk about life, love, loyalty, and the storytelling that truly moves people. You can register for these and all the other upcoming sessions by visiting the website of our sponsor, DonorSearch, the leader in responsible AI and donor research solutions for the nonprofit world at DonorSearch.net. Thanks for spending time with us today. We look forward to seeing you next time on Frontlines of Social Good and our sister programs. Until then, take care.